All right, it is the April 6th edition of the PFF forecast. This is the best one of the year. We've got Fred Gaudelli on the podcast, executive producer of Sunday Night Football, 23-time award winner, the whole deal. He's on the podcast, so that'll be the bulk of our podcast. We'll do a little intro, a little current event stuff, and then we'll wrap it up at the end. But that's going to be our show today, so let's rock. All right, we are into April. We're packing the churches in like 10 days, buddy.
Oh no. I mean, like I said, that'll tilt me probably more than anything, as I think CNN did a special on our state mates in here in Ohio packing the churches. It's going to be one of those where I don't know what's going to happen. In the future, we look back on this and think about, how out to lunch we were about this pandemic.
It's going to be 10 years from now, look back, hopefully we're out of it by then. Is going to be crazy. This is, I was thinking about this. We were talking last week. We're like, who's the person who we'd want to talk to, given that we work in football? And, football is just kind of in this bubble right now relative to the rest of the world. And so Fred came to mind because he is by far the number one producer in football, certainly, and probably all of sports production. He did Monday Night Football. He currently does Sunday Night Football, has worked with Al Michaels, John Madden, the whole crew for a really long time. And he's gracious enough. He spent like 35 minutes with us. So that interview is fantastic. We filmed that before the whole Trump Sports Commissioner Consortium happened. And I'm actually glad we did, because that whole thing was like, I mean, would you say that anything substantive even came out of that?
No, I mean, we were worried that something would, right? I mean, and that would make the interview, obsolete. But, as far as, I mean, I don't know what else he has to say at this point. But, your tweet saying, I'm a little bit worried now, it's probably
I'm more nervous
fair.
Now.
Yeah, it's probably fair given, basically every single thing he said about the pandemic has been wrong in real time. And so, but that being said, I don't know what he's supposed to say in this situation other than, some optimism, but I would be pretty worried if, folks took his call as, hey, there's nothing to worry about. That would be my biggest concern, because frankly, they should be planning on, some secondary sort of types of play.
I mean, if the NFL just sits back and is like, Trump said, we'll be back, like nothing we need to do, then I have a very low confidence that we're playing football in September. And Fred will talk about this a bunch, which is like the number of different options that he's preparing for. But it made me wonder, and you are probably the person whose opinion on this I respect the most, given your background and studying this whole freaking type of thing. Do you think coming out of this, there's going to be changes to our society that are so basically permanent, not like things that like for a month or two, but like things that really stick with us permanently for, the rest of our lifetime?
I don't think it's going to be as overt as, let's say, like 9/11 or things like that ended up being war, ended up building, making, the Department of Homeland Security, TSA, all that kind of stuff. But I do think we're going to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that your opinions do kind of matter, right? Like I've sort of gone over, like, 2,000-3,000 years ago, if you had a really stupid opinion, you were probably going to be eaten by a bear or ripped to shreds by a tiger. And then there are these, so like, for example, and I don't want to.
That can happen nowadays if you just marry Carol Baskin. I
don't want to single people out, but there are folks who are like, hey, I don't like to vaccinate my kids, and to each their own, when in reality, like, no, infectious diseases are the exact opposite of to each their own. And you actually have to like walk this earth with evidence-based opinions, and that's something that I think, has fallen by the wayside currently, that we might actually trust scientists and experts a little bit more than we did, previously. But that's just a hope I have. I don't know. I mean, we're not even to sort of the apex of this yet.
That's interesting. That's one thing that I hadn't considered. And I actually think now that you say it, that might be something that's changing already amongst groups of people who just a few months ago were like, no, these scientists are idiots. No one's died from coronavirus yet, right? There are people
Yeah.
saying that like 2 months ago, and they've had to quite literally eat their words. You brought up 9/11, and I've heard people say, oh, this is the biggest, um, thing that we've dealt with in our lifetimes for the past like 100 years or whatever. And I mean, I was pretty young when 9/11 happened, so maybe that's why I think this way, but I don't think it's crazy for me to say that's ridiculous. Like 9/11 to me was far bigger than this in the sense that there was so much unknown and like legit fear over the future of the country. And here I think people are, well, look, this is going to suck, but if we suck it up, like we'll come out the other side of it. And to me, that's why maybe there isn't as much change as we'd hope. Whereas with 9/11, it's like, holy crap, the way that you travel will never be the same. Like the Department of Homeland Security, like it was a war. Just quite honestly, like we're still fighting. And that's why I think maybe we come out of this and people are like, okay, Zoom chats were cool, but you know what's even cooler? Like going out to this bar that I couldn't go to for 6 months.
Well, I think it's also, 9/11 was unifying because at the time there was really no finger pointing.
True.
I mean, when you look at like the financial crisis of 2008, I mean, the majority of people who were not out to lunch at the time sort of knew what the reasons for that event was. People now, we're not united as a result of this because it's pretty clear like why we weren't prepared for it. And whereas with 9/11, I think President Bush's approval rating went through the roof because again, no one, it was literally something no one could have predicted. Whereas, like having, a pandemic was something that a lot of people predicted. Even like, George W. Bush, there came out that, his essay from 2005 came out today, about it.
Right.
And it's one of those where we're not uniting as a country necessarily because we're pointing fingers at people. I mean, we still are. I mean, the shaming people for congregating, and all that kind of stuff, or folks like Clay Travis saying we're too negative, all that stuff. So I do think 9/11 has a bigger effect because we were all in it together. I still don't think we're all in it together right now.
Look, I went for a run today because it was nice outside, and I don't know if I've ever seen, I'm in DC right now. I'm not sure if I've seen that many people like on the National Mall. And in fairness, a lot of them are practicing social distancing and there's a lot of people wearing masks and stuff like that. But it, to me, signaled that, hey, there is this like, okay, we're going to be all right sort of deal. And like when we come out of this, people are going to be willing to go outside. Here's one thought though, because we're talking about football and how it's impacted. Are you going to be more reticent to go to a Chiefs game? Like if week one you get tickets to the Chiefs game and they're putting people in stadiums, are you going to that game?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that will be a lasting thing, is that we're just going to be a little bit more discerning with how we spend, how we congregate with people, right? Like, I mean, until there's a vaccine and until there's, until we're over this, until R0 is clearly less than 1, universally and in space and time, I'm probably going to, avoid things that are unnecessary. And I do think that that's like, all sort of, trials and tribulations that we go through as a society. What ends up happening is oftentimes we'll tighten, the set of things we do to the things that are only essential, right? And that's probably a smart thing to do. And I think social gatherings are going to be one of those where, okay, it's already really risky that our kids are going to school or that we go to church or we go to the office. Why increase that by going to a Bengals game when,
well,
there's really not a whole lot to see.
I mean, if they have Burrow, maybe there's a reason to go watch them. No, I was thinking about it again too, and I was like, there's gonna be so many interesting things about when we come out of this and people are like, okay, now I can go back outside. Like people were predicting that there'd be this like baby boom after people are in quarantine, and I actually think it's the reverse. Like, I think finally once people are like free and out there, there'll be this like, holy crap, like thank God, and then 9 months later you'll want to have invested in diaper delivery services.
Yeah. And that's, I think people to the point of sort of respecting experts and things like that. I mean, for a long time, we've maligned people who work in, fast food. We've maligned nurses, we've maligned teachers, and I think a lot of people who have thoughtlessly done that are getting a big dose of reality. So I think it'll be an edifying time for the people who choose to think about it, and who knows what'll happen to folks who are sort of still denying that this is a thing.
It's an interesting conversation. We're going to talk to Fred Gaudelli. We talked to him on Friday. It's about 35, 40 minutes. It's really good. We even do a mini redraft of the greatest NFL draft of all time that he was the producer for. So it was a great conversation. We're going to go to Fred now, and then we'll come back afterwards. So here is Fred Gaudelli. All right, we are joined once again. We had him on last year. He didn't hate us too much, so he's back. Fred Gaudelli. He's Chris Collinsworth's boss. That's exciting for us. If you don't know who he is, you probably should. The executive producer of Sunday Night Football on NBC. No big deal. Just a record 9th straight time as the most watched show in primetime. Should mention that. Produced Monday Night Football back when it was awesome. Produced the NFL Draft. I think your bio said you've won 23 Emmys, which both feels like it should be a record and probably not enough. And no one that I can think is better to talk to right now because of what the hell is going on. So the season ends. I don't know. Do you take a day off? What is your process like? And then simultaneously, there's a pandemic happening, and football is like almost excluded from it. What's it been like from your vantage point?
Well, when the season ends, the first thing I like dive into hard is the schedule, meaning what our schedule is going to be for, 2020. So that's what I was doing. And obviously there were two dominoes. We were waiting to see what was going to happen. Would Drew Brees retire, or would he still play? Obviously he chose to play. And then where would Tom Brady end up? Because that was going to also signal a couple of moves. I mean, I'm not sure how many people had the Tampa Bay Bucks on their wish list before Tom got there. But now that Tom is there, he's on everybody's wish list. And, what do you do with the Patriots? I personally think the Patriots are very relevant. And I think there's going to be a lot of curiosity as to, who's going to be the quarterback, but how they're going to function. So that's what I was, working on the most was the schedule. And then trying to plan out the meeting schedule. As you know, we try to get the team back together. As a matter of fact, at our first Sunday Night Football meeting of the year yesterday, or 2 days ago, I should say. And so we're proceeding like, it's business as usual, knowing it's not going to be business as usual for a long, long, long time. But so far, other than the draft and probably OTAs and minicamp, the NFL has been somewhat affected, certainly not as affected as hockey, basketball, college, all that, baseball.
It was funny you mentioned the Patriots, because Eric and I have talked about this, and we both think that they should kind of play for the future, but there's that Bill Belichick, I think I can win with anybody, and it seems like that's what you think he's gonna try and do.
I mean, if you guys think for 2 seconds Bill Belichick is going to concede a game, I mean, he won't concede a snap. There is no way he's conceding anything. And I'm not even thinking, I want to prove something here. No, yeah. The DNA is to coach every single play and every single player, to their fullest ability, and nothing is going to change for him or his coaching staff.
Well, but then what's the purpose right now of going into everything with Stidham and Hoyer? Is he really that confident in his abilities, or do you think that there's a chance that they go after somebody like Cam Newton or Andy Dalton or Tua? So, a couple of years ago, right, there was the thought that they were going to move up for Mayfield. That never materialized. Is that something that you think is sort of in his back pocket? They don't have as much draft capital in 2020 as they would in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, but he can certainly, access picks from 21 and put them into this year for trade value. Mm-hmm. Look, I think, he probably, it wasn't like this caught him by surprise, right? I mean, he pretty much forced the move. I mean, if he had, opened his arms and patted him and, all those things. Tom's probably still the quarterback, but, in his mind, and I'm just guessing here, in his mind, he's probably saying, look, I never saw a quarterback have as great a season at 41 as Tom had, or at 42 as Tom had. And Tom wasn't great last year. I understand that, but there are a lot of reasons for that. I just think in his mind, hey, at some point, he may not be what he's been, and now might be the right time just to kind of move forward. But I think he's got a bunch of plans. But, the one about Bill is he's always going to look to upgrade every position on the team. So, look, he may be thinking, I want, Tua, or I want Herbert. I don't think Herbert. But, I do know this. He likes Stidham. I don't know that he thinks Stidham is the quarterback of the future, but I know when we met with Bill last year, I think before the first game, we talked about Stidham a little bit, and to that point, he seemed pretty positive about him. What happened through a whole season and practices and all that, I don't know, but I know this: he's not winging this.
I think it'd be fascinating. I know you would love this, is if next year the Patriots go through this kind of, hey, we won with Tom Brady playing this way, and now we're going to try and win in this like totally different way. And he brings in some crazy offensive scheme we've never seen before. And then you get a chance to tell that story, for everyone in America. That to me would be the interesting way to see them try and win games next year.
Yeah, who knows? Again, it depends, who that player is going to be. Like, Bill, like he's not married to any scheme. He's married to, hey, what does this player do best, and how can I utilize him to his fullest? So that's what he's going to do, and that's why I think they'll be interesting and relevant as long as he can get production out of that position.
Yeah. Speaking of, the draft, right, and Tua and all of these things in the Patriots, what they're going to approach. It's still scheduled as planned. And you've produced drafts for ESPN before. Given the constraints of this current situation, how would you produce this draft?
Well, I was going to say this. So the first draft I worked was 1983. So that was the draft, the 5 quarterback.
The best one of all time, really.
Right. And, I was in a very, very low level position. I was actually on the floor of the Sheridan Park, the Sheridan 7th Avenue there, whatever it was named back then. But, that was a really quiet room. There were 28 tables with helmets on them and 2 people from each team at the table. There was probably a dozen NFL executives and like 20 fans upstairs. So this probably isn't going to be a whole lot different than that was. There weren't any players at the draft. There weren't any celebrities at the draft. So, look, the thing about the draft is we always said this when we were at ESPN. We basically took a meeting where an announcement was made back in those days every 50 minutes and turned it into this huge event. And how did we do it? Well, we had commentators, we had highlights of every player. Eventually, we expanded to have report at team remotes. Now, you won't be able to have a reporter at team remotes, but you will be able to have a reporter plugged into a team because they have their contacts and, they're able to work. So, thankfully, it's not 1983. We have all this technology that it could be utilized right now. So, will the background look different? Will it look like a spectacle? No, the spectacle is gone for this year. There'll be no Las Vegas spectacle or Nashville spectacle or Philly, Chicago, whatever. That's gone. But the crux of it, the meat of it, the thing that people tune in for, Mel Kiper or Daniel Jeremiah or the highlights, that's all to be there, and I'm sure they'll be able to FaceTime players in as they get selected. So I think it's going to be compelling, and I mean, this isn't a outrageous prediction, but it's probably the highest rated draft ever because there's nothing on television right now to watch it.
No, I mean, thinking about, we do a draft show that we do live, on YouTube and on social media, and everyone's living on social media right now. So we're like kind of nervous because well, we have to do everything remotely, but also kind of excited because there's going to be more eyeballs on it and more of an opportunity. People aren't going to be paying attention to what suit Joe Burrow's wearing. And so the opportunity to show them information that's really interesting, I think, is heightened now.
Yeah, no question. And, you know, my last couple of years, it's funny, not that it's funny, but when this whole, you know, when all this social distancing and stay at home, when all that happened, you know, I'm watching CNN or I'm watching MSNBC or whatever news channel I'm on, and you see all the video conferences going on. And I reached out to like 4 other producers that I used to produce the NFL draft with. And we really kind of started that. We had video conferencing installed at every team where we didn't have a reporter. So we'd have like 8 or 9 reporters. So, you know, at 24 teams, we had video conferencing installed. And okay, the Lions just made their bring Matt Millen, you know, to video conferencing, or the Bucks just made their pick, Tony Dungy to video conferencing. So I'm telling you, I don't think it's other than the spectacle. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot different. I think you'll get all the highlights you want, you get all the commentary. I think you will have access to the team, or you know, you'll have access to somebody at a team. Because we have this great technology now. So it'll be interesting, and it may force people to rethink how they produce a lot of shows now, because these things aren't expensive.
Right.
Whereas the other things that we do, as you know, are very expensive. So I think it's going to force some change in our business, and change for the good.
Yeah, no Skycam for the NFL draft. You mentioned the 83 draft, and I want to ask you about the Giants this year, but Eric and I have been talking about, you know, without a lot of content to talk about, what about redrafting some previous drafts? And there's probably no better person to ask this of. If you had to redraft the 83 draft off the top of your head in like 60 seconds, how would you do it?
You're not going to change the first pick, right? I mean,
okay. Would you?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't change the first pick. Marino's probably your second pick. And, you know, I think with Dickerson, was he the second pick or the third pick in the draft?
He was 2.
It was not. Was it Kurt Warner and then Eric Dickerson, or the other way around?
It was Dickerson.
He was top 3. He was the second pick.
Yep.
Probably, you know, again, a different brand of football back in the 80s than we play today. And he went to the right team with the right coach, with John Robinson, who had been recruiting him since high school, by the way. So I think those 3 picks you'd probably keep up there. Darrell Bean definitely goes higher than 28. There's no question of that.
Yep.
You know, Blackwood.
What about Kelly?
Kelly? Yeah, Kelly's probably a 5 pick, right? I mean, he's got to be a top 5, I would think.
And even with the career Ken O'Brien had, he's probably higher, right? Because he ended up being a quarterback who started for a decade.
Like 18, 17, was he 17, 18, or was he higher than that?
He was after Kelly, I think, before Marino.
Kelly was like 14?
Yeah.
I think O'Brien was 24.
He was 24. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, Elway and Marino right off the bat, and then that class had a lot of Hall of Famers. Wasn't Bruce Matthews in that class?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, he was 9th, 8th.
Yeah.
There were quite a few Hall of Fame players in that class.
Joey Browner, you know, pretty good safety.
Carl Banks, right? I think the Giants had 2 first-round picks. I think they took Carl Banks and William Roberts.
Yeah.
You don't take William Roberts, although he was fine. He was a good player. Carl Banks was a real good player. So you're probably that pick. I'm trying to think. There were a couple other linebackers I think that were pretty good in that draft as well. That was a phenomenal draft, man. That was, as I like to say, that was well stocked.
I really think the Elway Marino question would be hotly debated because
no question.
Right? Because I mean, it's almost like if you were trying to think of the best facsimiles, maybe it's Charles Barkley in the NBA, like a guy who was amazing, but clearly doesn't get that extra level of then, you know, this guy was the greatest of all time conversation because of the Super Bowls, because of the championships. So I don't know, it'd be interesting.
But Marino, unlike Barkley, left the game with every meaningful passing record, right?
True.
Right. You know, touchdowns, he had yards, he had all those records. And Charles, who was phenomenal, you know, NBA player, you know, unfortunately for him, he was in the era of Jordan, where,
Right.
everybody's marginalized because they were in the era of Jordan.
Yeah,
What about
a couple second round picks to speak to your point, Fred. Leonard Marshall for the Giants. I
Big pick.
believe he made. Is he not a Hall of Famer? He's at least an all Giants team, right?
Without a doubt, he's all defensive tackle. Yeah, he was terrific.
Daryl Talley, Henry Ellard, all second round picks. Roger Craig of San Francisco, also really, really good. I mean, just an absolute Albert Lewis of Kansas City in round 3. So that was just an amazing draft.
Was Covert in that draft for the Bears?
Yeah, he was the 6th overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame this year. I mean, that's some draft.
Yeah.
maybe Karl Malone, the better Dan Marino comparison.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, Karl Malone, that's a good one.
Okay, we'll go from 83 to 2020.
Right.
We're not going to talk about the Knicks. We won't have to talk about the Knicks. We'll talk only about the Giants.
Thankfully.
They're sitting there at 4. I think it was a couple months ago, maybe during the combine, you asked me about big boy Becton and how he did last year. So now you've had a couple months. You've been able to pour into all the scouting reports. Pick 4 comes around. What do you want to see happen?
Well, I think they have to exhaust every possibility to try to move up and get Chase Young. I know the Redskins are probably not making a deal with the Redskins, but I mean, they have 2 tremendous area of need: a game-changing pass rusher and a, all-world left tackle. To me, they have to come out of the draft, with one of those 2 things. I know the linebacker from Clemson, Isaiah Simmons, people like him, but, you're going to have the right coach and the right system to take advantage of a guy like that. And I know Patrick Graham comes from Belichick's system, and, Bill obviously that is multiple and good at taking players and put position to make plays. I don't know. You tell me, is that high for him? Is that high for Simmons? But if I'm the Giants, it's got to be a game-changing defensive player or a, 10-time Pro Bowl left tackle.
There's a scenario where Young and Simmons are still available at 4, I think, because if someone trades up to either 2 or 3 for Tua, and then maybe Okudah goes
at 3 to the Detroit Lions,
that would be a way to make it happen. It's interesting that you said 2 big areas of need, because Eric and I honestly have caught a lot of flack for talking about how a huge area of need for the Giants is receiving.
Yep.
So are you either A, confident in what they have at receiver now, or do you just think, well, I would rather see Daniel Jones make it happen by himself? Why wasn't that up there for you?
Well, I mean, I would just say this. I mean, for 5 years, we had arguably one of the top 5 receivers in the game. And they went to the playoffs once.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal and made great plays. And
that's Eli's fault, though.
It was not Eli's fault. Defenses had to take advantage, had to account for him. But look, when the Giants have been good in their history, they've won with pass rushers and lots of them. I don't know if you've been watching any of these Sunday Night Football classics this week.
Oh yeah.
You watched the night that Jerry World Open or the Man Bowl. I mean, you look at the Giants. I mean, they're just bringing in defensive end after defensive end after defensive end, and they're getting after the quarterback. And that's kind of always they've won. And you look at their defense now, and like, who are they? I mean, look, I know they have some solid tackles, but those aren't the guys that generally get the sacks. But the receivers, look, I always think too, I mean, didn't they get a decent receiver last year in the 5th round?
Yeah, Slayton was pretty good, and Tate's, but I also think, and I agree with you, I mean, you think back historically, I think everybody remembers the 07 team as being the team that could rush Justin Tuck up the middle, OCU Mignora, and Strahan on the outside. But when I think of the 2 most recent Giants Super Bowl teams, I think of the Victor Cruz coming out of nowhere to be, the leading receiver in the NFL in 2011. And then I think of the 07 team, I think of Plexico Burress, Steve Smith, and then Amani Toomer. I think of those guys really elevating Eli Manning. And so I don't know. I agree that they certainly have needs at those positions, but receiver is also a position where they could.
Shepard, Tate, and Slayton, and Coleman. I think those guys are good enough for now, but they're not nearly good enough in the positions that we're talking about. And look, in the NFL, if you can't protect the quarterback or get to the quarterback, it's really hard to win. And they haven't been able to do that now for almost 10 years.
They also can't cover at linebacker too. I mean, there are so many. There's so many
they
places.
have a lot of needs. There's no question about it. But I think that's why you're going to have to get creative defensively. And then if they went with Simmons, hey, you better be utilizing this person in a lot of different places to really maximize what he does. Because if you're just going to say, hey, we're going to play him at he's going to be like the eighth man in the box or something like that, then he's probably not have the impact you need him to make.
So because our thought is, what's the way to find out most quickly whether or not Daniel Jones? So this is my next question. Right. So what's the fastest way to find out if Daniel Jones is any good is to give him all the weapons in the world. And to your point about left tackle, protection is certainly a weapon that a quarterback utilizes. But for us, it's sort of find out in 2 years or 3 years whether Daniel Jones is good enough and then move on, or obviously lean into him if he's any good. What do you think about Daniel Jones as a prospect for the Giants at QB?
Well, one thing I do know is he won't be any good on his back, right? That's not any good on his back. And I think the real negative to him last year was that he had a lot of fumbles in the pocket when everything collapsed around him. So if he doesn't fix that, and I was talking to Jason Garrett about this. If he doesn't fix that, then he's got problems. So look, I think and again, these are all big ifs. Evan Ingram has never been healthy for an entire season, but if he's healthy, Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, and then Saquon as your ultimate check down. That to me is enough weapons, to really get it done. But if you cannot protect him, or you can't run it, enough with Saquon, or run it effectively enough with Saquon, I don't think it's really going to matter. And then the other part of that is, if you can't stop anyone, and we know they couldn't stop anyone.
Right.
And how many games are you going to win? 42-35. You're not going to win a lot of games that way.
Yeah, even if Okudah slipped, but there's so much. Anyone on the defense would help.
And look at the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs, they started out horrendous on defense last year. They changed out their coordinator. They had seven new starters. By the time we got to the Super Bowl, they weren't great, but they were solid, man.
Yep. They could get 3 or 4 stops a game, which is all really. If you have a good offense, that's all you really need, right?
Chris Jones would, ratchet it up there on a couple series. Their linebackers were better. They weren't great, but they were better. Tyrann Mathieu was a guy they were able to use, for all his versatility. And, they made enough plays at end of games to win games. And by the end of the year, they were, they weren't the 85 Bears, but they were solid.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a great point about coordinators and versatility, right? That's kind of what Simmons gives you, is if you have a lot of weaknesses and you have a player that can sort of play a bunch of different roles, then for Kansas City it was like, all of a sudden Daniel Sorensen isn't asked to do anything he's bad at, right? And then the linebackers aren't asked to cover anymore because Mathieu can sort of cover backs if you need him to. And you're right. And that's what Simmons, I think, or if you think about Jeffrey Okudah, if Jeffrey Okudah comes in and he's a shutdown number 1 cornerback, then all of a sudden DeAndre Baker isn't asked to, he doesn't have as much pressure on him to be that guy for the team, because he clearly struggled last year. So there's a lot, and that's sort of the beauty of
would be the ultimate pick for them, because since they got rid of Jason Pierre-Paul, they haven't had that guy, one guy that, hey, if you single block him, there's a chance he's probably going to get your quarterback. And, they haven't had that person, and they really need that person and that kind of player. So to me, who's the next best guy at defensive end? Who's the next best defensive end in this draft for you guys?
Second rounder.
Curtis Weaver, or it's a while before you get to another guy that's worthy of a pick.
Right. What I'm hearing what I'm hearing is that they need to trade that pick for like 4 other picks right behind it so that they can draft 4 great players to help them out next year.
What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Do it.
Yeah. What do you think, Fred, about using, because you have a top half of the second round pick. What do you think of using that, sending that pick over to Jacksonville for Yannick Ngakoue, or, signing, Jadeveon? I mean, the cap space thing might be an issue, but like, to me, that might be your best bet in terms of getting somebody who's proven at the thing that, as you said, pass rushing matters quite a bit here. Is that more enticing because I think the price to move up to 2 might be higher maybe than other than, from a draft pick perspective, than actually acquiring somebody like Ngakoue.
Ngakoue is someone who I don't think I've had a Jacksonville game since he's been on the team. I think I had a preseason game his rookie year where he actually made a few plays in this preseason game against your Bengals. But I think so I don't really know him well enough. Clowney, look, I think Clowney's going to be severely disappointed here that he's not going to get the money he thought he was going to get and thinks he deserves. Whether he deserves it or not, I think in his mind, he was $20 million a year. He was going to kind of get that money. So I don't know what kind of Clowney you're going to get, if, you're getting a bargain Clowney, come summertime.
Not going to get more than Romo.
What's that?
I said he's not going to get more than Romo.
No, he's not going to get more.
Okay, so this is the question that I can't wait to hear your thoughts on. I'm sure you've thought of it a bunch. We look forward to next season.
Right.
Is there a next season? If it is it happening in stadiums without fans? Are you sequestered on Mars in a quarantine? Like, you must be running through how, you might produce a game in all of these different scenarios. But what are your thoughts on that right now?
Well, I mean, look, I'm trying to stay as positive as I can, because I just think that the alternative is not a world anybody wants to live in. So, I'm hopeful we're going to have NFL football in September, and actually in training camp as well in August. Will we have it in front of fans? I don't know. Without with a much more robust system, it's hard to feel like you're going to want to be in a stadium with 75,000 people,
right,
for a game. So if we're in stadium, if the NFL, the question for the NFL would be, we can't start the season with fans in September, but we wait October, we might be able to have full fans, which would play a 12-game season, or whatever it takes to get to the Super Bowl date and do that. So I run these scenarios in my head. We have so much access to the teams when we're doing games. We go to their facility, we watch practice, we talk to the coaches, we talk to the players, we sit in a small room. I don't see that happening. I have a hard time picturing teams letting people outside the immediate organization into their facility, unless we've got a test that you could take the test when you walk in. And yeah, he's negative. Come on in. Which, who knows what it's going to be like by then. But I think the access to the teams is going to change. So I think it'll be more doing these kind of meetings, what we're doing right here on Zoom. But, I think college football is going to have a little bit of a harder road because 50,000 kids back on campus. Are parents going to want to send their kids back to campus? And can you guarantee that you're going to have a virus-free environment? I don't know how you can do that. So there's going to be a lot of innovation here in the next weeks, months, year.
You bring up a good point, which is, what if it's like 2 months away, right? So it's like, okay, we start without fans. The fan experience at football games is it's unlike any other sporting event, right? There's only 8 home games. It means so much. If there's already, say the NBA finals are, starting in October too, would you not just say, okay, why don't we can we push the Super Bowl into March? Like, is that something that you think is actually feasible, or does it have to be, do we have to shorten the season?
Well, I think the question would be, I don't think the NFL, I mean, and this is the quandary for every league right now. How far out can you push your season and then start your next season where you normally start? If you're saying we're playing the Super Bowl in March, okay, well, when are we doing the combine? When are we doing the draft? When are we evaluating all these players? When are we doing free agency? So I don't see that as a real solution. I would say maybe we can move the Super Bowl back a week, or maybe to President's Weekend, and play it then. But then, hey, does Tampa have hotel rooms that weekend? I don't know what's going on in Tampa this weekend. Do they have the rooms? Can the NFL still command all the facilities they command when they go to a Super Bowl? Or is this going to be a Super Bowl where, like, it's a game? It's just another game as opposed to the spectacle that the draft is going to be here. So I think, those are obviously worst case scenarios that we all have to be thinking through right now. But, I was talking to someone who produces the NBA, and I said, but if your season ends on October 1st, when are you starting?
Yeah, when are you starting the next year? I
mean, you're going to start training camp 2 weeks later? Or I know there's been a lot of talk about the NBA redoing their schedule and, starting at Christmas and having playoffs go into July. But, that's not something you want to be forced into. I don't think. So at some point, leagues are going to have to say 2020 is probably not going to happen, or, hey, we just got to move right to the playoffs right now and try to get this thing wrapped up by August.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think, honestly, we talk about like the fans and that experience and how important that is and stuff. And I agree, but it really is like what you do and what that really drives the league, right? I mean, fans have been filling up stadiums for decades, but the league hasn't been popular as it is now without the production that we've, the TV deals and the games and the experience and all that kind of stuff. To me, I think like that has to be where the innovation is, right? In terms of how to provide a product for the league and the fans without, despite all of these situations, because like, to me, that's where the catastrophe is. If people, who have been, because if we get to September and people haven't been out of their homes for, carry the 6 months, right? And, and we don't have anything to watch on TV, that I think was where the catastrophe is, right? And that's, probably where the league has to be thinking ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, and we have to play without fans. That's still a pretty significant revenue hit for the league because, that's no season ticket sales.
Right.
That's no parking. That's no, food. It's none of that. And it's the greatest revenue driver in the NFL is the TV contracts. There's no question about it. But you're never counting on not having any ticket sales or any concession sales or any parking. I mean, and that would be it would be a severe economic hit to the teams.
I've solved it. You pump fan noise in, and you just create a stimulus package those seem to be easy to do.
What
and
if
that'll pay for the concessions?
What if you had a secondary broadcast for like pay-per-view only? That would be basically another way, right? So like boxing, where you pay $100 to get a souped up version of the game broadcast, just like you're there.
Oh, I mean, I'm trying to soup it up for you as much as I can. Like,
the green zone isn't enough, Brad.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of show. I mean, we could do different kinds of show, but I mean, look, I think there'd be some things that the fans would enjoy because the audio on the field would be amazing. I mean, you'd be hearing everything.
Yeah.
You'd be hearing everybody's calls. You'd be hearing the checks. You'd be hearing coaches yelling at guys. You'd be hearing it all because you're playing a cavernous environment and the sounds are just going to be, rebounding in. So the audio experience for the fans would be different and I think fun. That natural excitement, though, that you get when a big game's kick off and on a big third down when you hit a stop and those types of things, obviously we'll miss those greatly. And look, it's not the same without the fans, but at least you have a sense of normalcy. Games are being played and You're able to watch these games, and people are writing about the games, and players are talking about the games. And so, I mean, look, that's the worst, that's one of the worst case scenarios, but it's not as bad as not having games.
Yep.
I could not agree more. Okay, I want to get you out of here on this because we did this last year. I think maybe this year, if you nod or wink, if we're close, week 1, Thursday night, my thought is Kansas City at home versus Houston. Thoughts?
I mean, it's
it's on the schedule.
It's on the schedule. I mean, I think it's a pretty good game. I mean, look, obviously it's a rematch of a wild game. I would have liked to Trey Hopkins.
Yes.
But,
so would all of Houston.
Yeah. I think that would be fine.
Okay. And then Sunday night, Tampa Bay at home against New Orleans.
I'll take it.
There you go.
There we are.
Fred, are you able to keep swimming? Do you have a pool that you can use?
That's another. I mean, that's what I've done. I'm now trying to. I've been doing a lot of walking, so I've been doing like 6 or 7 miles a day. I'm trying to take the time down per mile. But no, the swimming had to end because they closed every pool.
I'm in the same boat, and they just closed the apartment gym, and now I'm driving my girlfriend nuts because I'm doing workouts in the house.
Yes, you do.
It's awful.
My daughter goes out in the back and puts down a blanket, and she does them in the backyard. So,
yeah, I wish I had one. Fred, it is always a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time, man, and stay safe out there.
But before I got to ask you guys a question before we do. Best player in the draft. Let's start with you, George.
Joe Burrow.
He's the best player?
Yeah.
And what do you compare him to that's in the league right now?
It's in the league right now.
Or
that's good.
A fact that we would know.
I really like, and I'm gonna tribute Mike Renner here. I really like the Romo comparison.
Yeah, it's funny, going back and watching these games this week on NBC. Like we had Romo's first start. I mean, Romo was really good, man. I mean, I think Romo really doesn't get the credit he deserves because they just didn't get to that Super Bowl.
Here's a question, because I watched that game in large part because I got to hear Matt. I mean, I knew you guys were producing it, obviously, but how many quarterbacks that are in the league right now in their current state would you take over Romo basically at his prime?
That's a good question. Obviously, you would take Mahomes. Deshaun Watson, that'd be a hard call. Probably not.
Yeah, not yet.
Tom and Drew, they're in their 40s now, so you would take those guys, and not 40s, but you would take those guys. No, Romo was terrific, man. He made a lot of plays, covered up a lot of issues the Cowboys had back in those days. I mean, it was unfortunate. He didn't get a lot of time with Tyron Smith and Zach Martin and Travis Frederick and Lyle Collins.
Yeah.
He never had that group in front of him. But no, he was a hell of a player. So, Eric, your top player?
My comp for Burrow is Deshaun Watson.
Oh, okay.
I think the people are overblowing that his arm strength isn't very good, and then they're both mobile and both kind of just winners, right? It's kind of the best player in the draft, and this sounds stupid because we try to convince you not to draft him, but I think Chase Young's the best player in the draft. He's not the most valuable, but he's the best. I think he's probably the best player, probably the surest bet to do really well. So
Chase Young better than Bosa? Nick Bosa.
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say he projected about the same, maybe a little lower actually. But the other thing is that we don't know how good Chase Young is athletically because he's never tested. So if you assume similar athleticism tests, I would say that he's a little bit better than Nick Bosa.
So, I'm gonna say he's more athletic than Bosa.
So coming out of college better than Clowney coming out of college.
I think the issue was Clowney. I think Clowney was really overrated coming out of college.
Yeah.
And he's kind of overrated now, frankly. Like he's a really good run defender, but he doesn't get after the passer.
He's hell, man. When he wants to play, he's hell.
Yeah, but he doesn't get after the passer nearly as well as some of his contemporaries, the guys that are considered elite. I don't think he's as good of a pass rusher.
Okay. All right, guys. I enjoyed it, man, as always.
Dude,
Thank you.
This is my favorite podcast every year.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks.
Stay healthy.
See ya.
We
All
will.
right.
All right. Big thanks to Fred for coming on. The guy is it was really kind of him, honestly, because he's got like 40 things clearly that he's thinking about right now. What was your big takeaways? One of optimism, pessimism? What did you come away from that with?
Well, it's really cool that like his perspective is so much deeper than ours, having done the draft way back in the day and having done games in circumstances where football wasn't as popular as it is now, and now when it really is popular, where he is saying, you know, the draft wasn't always this fan spectacle. It once was a boardroom in the middle of a hotel somewhere, and so I can spin up entertainment from this no matter what. And so that's an optimistic take, I think, on his part. And that was welcomed, I think, from my end.
No, I came away with it optimistic as well. And here was why. The fact that guys like Fred are thinking about how do we produce the game of football in different situations, which is what he's doing, right? He's already planning out the schedule. He's already thinking about, if there's no fans, what do I do? You know, if we have to go to some other remote location, what do I do? Gives me hope that the NFL as a whole are going to have these types of conversations and and you've got such a head start that theoretically, if any organization should be able to have a full season, it's them. I also thought it was really interesting, the perspective of the importance of fans in his mind from a financial standpoint. And like, I hadn't thought of that. I had just thought of the TV deals. But if they say, okay, well, we can start the season without fans, or we can make it 3 games shorter, I would have thought no chance they pick 3 games shorter. But he made it seem like maybe they would push it to October if they could have fans in the whole time.
Yeah, and I just think from the perspective of that, you know, the likelihoods, I don't think 3 weeks makes that big of a difference, but
True.
it's an interesting thought. With so many stadiums now going towards personal seat licenses, though, do you think that it is as big of a financial problem as he lays it out to be, right? Because folks have to like buy the right to even own their seats at this point, which is, you know, a huge. I don't think the individual ticket sales is really the thing that is, you know, sort of driving revenue for some of these teams.
No, I'd agree. And I think it matters more for the smaller teams where there is a sizable maybe portion of, say, that city that works around these games, right? But I think there's a way, you know, because we're, you know, this is Monday. We recorded this interview on Friday. So a couple of days that I've had to think about it, one of the things I thought of was, if you have 5 months to prepare for not having fans buying food in your stadium, you have 5 months to prepare to sell food to fans that are watching at home that would normally go to the game.
Yep.
And you have 5 months to prepare for a mobile experience where, hey, if you want to pay $10, like, you have a chance to, and I'm just spitballing here, like, what if you paid $20 for an app that allowed you to make noise from a certain part of the stadium? Like,
yeah.
I'm just saying, there are ways to get around this given the amount of time we have. So I thought it was an interesting perspective from him, given that he's been doing this for so much longer. But I feel like there's got to be a way around it.
Yeah, like you said earlier, I think it's important if the teams are thinking about and the league is thinking about alternative situations here. You know, what we can't have is, I think, what, you know, the president did say the other day, which is, look, we just can't not have sports for that long. We just can't not have, like, people who think that way are not they're dealing with how they think the world should be rather than how the world is, right? And that doesn't, and, you know, we try to talk about that on this show all the time. Like, you know, you have to look at things for the way they are. And in a circumstance like this, that's just not going to cut it. You have to come up with a contingency. If you really want sports to happen, you have to not only take consider very strongly the guidelines that the public health officials are giving you, but you also have to craft solutions around them.
And that's the thing. I think we feel, oh, well, it's America. We always figure out a way, and we'll figure out a way. But even that is different than saying, like, it just has to be this way, so it will be. If you go, hey, this is our goal. Like, is there any possible parameter set that allows us to meet that goal? Let's go try and hit them. That's one thing. But sitting back and being like, well, we're just going to make it so because we have to watch football September 5th or whatever it is, like, that's a totally different one. So I'm with you. Any other thoughts before we head out of here?
No, thank you guys all again for listening and stepping through this tough time with us. I'm looking forward to the draft in it seems like 3 short weeks, so it won't be that. It's going to be
fun.
It won't be that far away.
It was funny. I was looking at, speaking of preparing for the draft, we have a mock draft that you can go read. I'll just let you know right now, it's not our prediction of what will happen. We interviewed Evan Silva, who does a mock draft that is better at predicting what will happen than anyone else out there. So you want to read that, go to establishment.com, read that, and then come to PFF and read what we would do and see how different it is. I think that was a fun exercise. And then we've got Kev Cole coming on the podcast on Thursday. So that'll be a lot of fun. So hope you enjoyed, Fred, and we'll talk to you guys on Thursday.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.